Muted, Ryan.
Well, thanks, Tom. Welcome to the Smoking the Rope podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Basor, and today is episode 80. And real excited to have the official announcement on our show from and have our good friend, attorney, and businessman Josh Covert. Thanks for being on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm real excited to be here. I always like being on your Smoking Rope podcast.
Excellent, excellent. And just so the viewers at home know, Josh is right upstairs, the office. So this one will be a good one. Tom, really, what's going on, man?
Well, we're on the road visiting our customers this week and getting out there. Have a few vendor days and just kind of doing a recap of last year and talking about what 2022 is kind of looking like for us. And yeah, just getting out there, and it's nice to finally do that. I haven't done that in quite some time, so long
It's
overdue.
awesome. You're going to be at Local Roots tomorrow.
Yep, we'll be at Michigan's Finest here today.
Mm-hmm.
And then we will be at Local Roots tomorrow and Botanical in Lansing, I believe, tomorrow. Yep,
Oh,
confirmed.
both in one day.
Yeah, we try to hit a few in a day.
Okay, cool. Well, awesome. I think I'm going to see you tomorrow, so
Sweet.
looking forward to that. Kevin is harvesting some flower out of his new building and is not able to make it, so we'll hold it down. But I wanted to give Josh a proper introduction. The kind of the topic on this. I know a lot of people out there have known Josh for years, and he made an announcement a while back saying he's no longer, practicing with Covert Law, his firm, and sold that to James. Josh is now the CEO and of counsel for Meds Cafe and some of their other affiliates. So super excited about it, and then to talk about it, it's pretty historic for what Josh started as a defense attorney and worked his way through, helped legalize, and now is going to be running a cannabis company. So very interesting stuff, and especially for everybody that knows Josh. But I first met Josh. I heard about Josh. I used to get the State Journal sent to me, and when I was in down in Morgantown, West Virginia, in prison, and I started reading about this Josh from the Free Brie case. So started coming on my radar. It was great to be reading and seeing when he won that. I remember still in my cell. So got out and I started some social media and a company and started working with cannabis related companies. That's all I wanted to work with. And Josh at the time was with Nichols Law, and I had known Mike from the CPU days, and Josh hired me, and we did some work together, and it went pretty well. And then got to know Josh a lot better. And MI Legalized. Josh was the MI Legalized board member. Especially the first campaign, was out talking, extremely active, and was always saying, my job is to put myself, I want to put myself out of a job. And he did, but on to bigger and better things. From there, rented an office started 3 years ago in Covert Law, and was doing consulting and worked for the MICIA, and then started Redemption, and now I'm sure a lot of you guys know we bought this a building just down the street in Lansing in Old Town, a beautiful office building together along with James McGill. So awesome journey. It's been a good one, and thanks for being on, Josh. And everybody knows that we wanted to hear a little bit about why you got into cannabis law, your reason why, and then tell us about this transition to meds. And I wonder if we're going to be seeing a lot of other defense attorneys and attorneys trying to do the same thing, copying you.
Yeah, well, thanks. So, yeah, I became an attorney a little over 10 years ago, looking back at it. And I went to law school to fight the drug war in regards to cannabis. I grew up in a home where my parents used cannabis, throughout my childhood. And I just never saw cannabis users as criminals. And as I, got a little bit older, decided to make a change and go to law school. I originally went to college to be a ski bum. I had a ski area business management degree, and I worked in the ski industry for a while, something I was passionate about. But as you get older, sometimes your passions change, and I started looking at society a little differently and seeing, the importance of standing up for cannabis users and becoming a defense attorney. So that's what I started down that path to do. And working, over the years as an activist and taking on lots of different caregiver cases over the years. I kind of was real happy to see the, fruits from being a criminal defense attorney and really making change and helping people, and became a part of MI Legalized to kind of further those efforts. And, we now have adult use cannabis legalized in Michigan. And so the importance of me taking a lot of these cases, I think, has lessened somewhat over the years. And I started working more and more with cannabis businesses. And that's kind of what spearheaded starting my own law firm, was to be able to provide services to cannabis businesses, and something we did really well. And I was happy to be a part of that and to grow that business. But in the last month or so, I had some new opportunities presented, and the fact that I think I had my law firm in a really good spot where I could sell it to my partner, and I knew they would be able to continue on with what I built, was a big part in me kind of making this transition.
That's incredible. So how has it been? So you go from, practicing law. I'm here every day. I know you're doing mostly business, but we'll get into some of the cases and what you're still doing, but transition into running a cannabis company. I made a joke, all the defense attorneys are going to be jumping over. It's a lot easier said than done, obviously, and you got to have a skill set, but what's changed in your day-to-day and your focus, and how is it going?
It's been a whirlwind, I guess, just trying to catch up to speed. There's so many things that I hadn't really thought about or learned up until this point when it comes to actually running a cannabis business. I've had to familiarize myself with things like Flow Hub and Weed Maps and lots of different things that I hadn't really thought about before, merchandising, marketing, purchasing. I've always been with, as far as a lawyer, I think a consultant in a lot of ways, because I understand lots of the industry, and then doing licensing work, but never really kind of diving into maybe the marketing as much. More being maybe a consultant, but not actually someone maybe pulling the trigger on some of these things. So it's certainly been a fast couple of weeks. I guess I started January 1st, and I'm still every day taking on something new, something I haven't done before, which is real exciting. And that's kind of one of the things that I liked about taking on this new job, was being able to work on some new things and take on some ideas I've had and actually see them through, as opposed to just, consulting.
Yeah. Now, we, as far as the show, and, myself and Tom, we've known the Meds Cafes guys, Michael and Fitz, early on, and Driven was in the Rogers City store, and I know Tom's worked with them as well, and good guys. And leading up to it, though, knowing that, and it's more of a mom and pop. What's kind of your guys's like your theory, or not your theory, but your business philosophy now? What type of brand are you trying to be seen as forward? Because I look at you, obviously, as talented to be able to do that, but you bring a whole another level of cannabis, really street cred, to a business in Michigan, because everybody knows you, and especially the clientele you've had over the year that you've helped. So what is your guys' focus moving forward, and what type of company are you guys overall trying to be?
Yeah, so I think, first and foremost, for me teaming up with this group, I really wanted to make sure we're in it for the caregiver still, and we're going to separate ourselves from a lot of what we see as, the MCMA group and a lot of the influence that they have, and try to do something different and work with people that have been here for a while, or in it for the right reasons. Try to work with growers that came up as caregivers, like Driven and like Relief, and to partner ourselves in a strategic way with a lot of those caregiver run organizations, and to really put out there good quality product at good value. And so one of the things that we started working with right away was bringing in redemption and offering $25 eights across the board, and that's something I think is shows where we're at, and that is working with the right people and offering good product at the right prices. And so I think that's something going forward consumers will see more of from Meds Cafe is those types of products at those types of prices.
It's encouraging to see that this is still happening, that there are companies still backing caregivers and people that came from the caregivers market. As you see more MSOs come into the state of Michigan, and the competition getting a little bit tighter, and margins going down, and things are starting to level off. But it's nice to see that that Meds Cafe has had the foresight to bring on someone like you to make sure that our type of products are still available to the public as more and more MSOs come through. What do you think are our biggest challenges this year coming up? That we're going to face together.
I think a lot of it you kind of talked about in the question in terms of margins and prices coming down. I think we're going to see that across the board. I think some are more reluctant to do that, and a lot of time it's those larger MSOs. And I think a lot of working together, those smaller or medium-sized shops, working and having those right relationships with caregivers is what's going to help get both of us through some of those times when we have to compete with those larger MSOs and those larger companies here in Michigan, for sure. And so I think the biggest challenges is going to be keeping customers going to the right shops for the right reasons.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. And we speak a lot about that in this office as we theorize on what's happening to the market in the future. And, redemption went down in Lansing, thanks to Homegrown and Pure Options that both grow really good flower and have a lot of retail. You don't sell a lot of flower in Lansing unless you're at 25 and 8. So we experimented. It worked. It works for us. And right now, I don't think there's any other brands that have done it that don't remediate their flower. Some of the big MCMA people, that's their SOPs. So it's an interesting marketplace. They were so concerned on attacking the caregivers to keep the price per pounds up. They forgot about the ex-caregivers that are in here busting their ass every day and keeping it going. So,
well, we're next.
Yeah. Well,
not if we band together, and that's the whole point. That's how we got this far. That's the fight's always been there. It's just kind of changed its focus a little bit, and that's what we need to do as a group and as people. I mean, it's the people's medicine. We need to keep it in people's hands, but who's controlling the narrative on the market, and how we start to lose touch as time goes on from the past of when we were fighting really hard every day to stay, this side of a jail cell, let alone, making it as just, on a daily basis. It's in our blood to keep fighting, and it almost seems like it always keeps coming back, just in different forms.
Yeah, I think I've always kind of been a fighter, and that's why I kind of went the route I did in terms of being a criminal defense attorney and standing up against the state of Michigan, every day for 10 years. And I think now that fight's going to shift a little bit to those MSOs and some of those other groups, and it's going to be a little bit different, but there's always that fight for sure.
Yeah, and with that, we talk about the remediation and the pre-remediation. It's a big deal for me personally moving forward this year. Is that if companies are pre-remediating all their flower and then getting it tested and then passing and not having to tell a consumer, I think that's wrong. So we're at least going to switch to putting on our bags, never remediated, no CRC type stuff, and we'll stand behind it. So at least start getting that message out, and doing it in shops like Meds Cafe, and having it at the front lines, because Josh and I talked about this morning. the general public. I mean, you get on Reddit and Discord, the general public buyers don't know that much about the MCMA, but it's growing. But the shops sure do, and those are the buyers, and the employees sure do. And you hear things like, and they question their managers when they're ordering that stuff. So it's working, and we're going to keep on doing it. So what, Josh, as far as Meds Cafe, tell us like kind of your footprint now, what you're planning in the future to grow, and what do you guys have the next year or two going on?
Yeah, well, we're real excited. We have our first grow harvesting any day now. And so that's real excited. That's going to be Faded Acres. And that's a grow we have located up in Rogers City. It's a small medical grow. And it's something we're kind of learning with and moving forward. It's going to kind of be fun to have our own brand of flower to supplement the other brands that we carry, and also to get that out into some other stores. And we currently have retail locations in Rogers City, Lowell, and Manistee. And then we have 3 other locations that we hope to be opening in northern Michigan late spring, early summer. So it's going to be a good year of expansion for us and doubling the number of stores. I should mention there's also the Cedar Springs store that has a little bit different management and ownership structure, but we still have a cooperative agreement where we're working together under the name Meds Cafe. And so there's 4 stores now, 3 to open in the next, let's say 6 months or so. So we're really excited about that. And moving forward, trying to find those locations in Michigan that need the type of products and that we provide and prices, so that's going to be quite a bit in terms of looking past into the next year, hopefully more stores and more expansion.
That's cool. Speaking on another note, when we started Great Lakes Expungement Network, you were the first attorney we worked with. Obviously, Sons and Daughters and myself are out of the same office and done work, and you really took a lot on and got us going and carried the bill for a while. But then also been doing cases. So appreciate you now in this new role. You guys have a social equity plan, and it involves working with the foundation and Glenn and still doing some cases. So talk to us about what that looks like. And then even, for instance, you're working on a case this week.
Yeah. So when I decided to take this job, I couldn't see myself just giving up being a criminal defense attorney. That's something that, I really felt strongly about. So when I talked to him about joining up and taking on this new role, I wanted the ability to still take a few select criminal cases, and I wanted to do those pro bono. And so the plan, what we've got right now, is we're going to be contributing attorney services to the Redemption Foundation in order to do pro bono criminal cases. And I started this role January 1st, and I had my first trial actually under that new program scheduled for Friday of this week, where I was going to be down in Berrien County defending someone who was worked for a licensed grower and was charged with drugged driving. And so I was going to fight that case this Friday. It looks like it's getting adjourned because of some COVID issues with the court. And so we'll be probably doing the trial sometime in the next month or so. But I was really kind of happy to continue being a criminal defense attorney and still taking on a few select cases where, it fits the Redemption Foundation. And I plan on doing more of that coming up. And so what I've kind of told a few clients is that I might kind of be retiring from as a criminal defense attorney somewhat, but I'm still willing to maybe, put the gloves back on every now and then, like George Foreman or something like that. Right. So, I mean, I'll keep going.
What's your advice for people that are facing a situation where they're trying to swab your mouth and try and hit you with a drugged driving? Because it seems like obviously that's the way they want things to go, is to have a way to, even though there's no actual evidence that there's impairment for driving when using cannabis, and it's nearly impossible to determine if someone's impaired. What's your advice to someone? We're opening a lounge, and that's a concern and something we want to be able to give advice on the way out the door to make sure people understand what their rights are.
Yeah, so I've got a lot of experience working with drugged driving and even drunk driving cases, going back to working with the Nichols Law Firm. The Nichols Law Firm primarily did and handled those types of cases, and so I learned a lot working through with them over the years, and then taking these types of cases. And there's going to be differing theories on how to approach that, but the way I look at it is you don't want to submit to any form of testing other than a blood test. Once you get to a blood test, you've already been arrested. There are more severe consequences for refusing a blood test. But unless they're taking your blood, I would refuse any other types of tests. Those tests would be any of the field sobriety tests. You can refuse those. You can refuse to take the mouth swab as well. There would be a civil infraction potentially for refusing the mouth swab, but I think taking a civil infraction and paying a small fine is worth giving them evidence that really is bad evidence, and it can be misconstrued. And it's hard to misconstrue a zero or a no, not a no test, right? It is what it is. But as soon as you submit to a test, as inaccurate as those are, I wouldn't feel comfortable taking one to begin with when we're talking about a saliva test. And the consequences for not taking it pale in comparison to the downside of giving them some evidence that there had been consumption. But on the other hand, just because they have that evidence, and let's say you did take a mouth test, doesn't mean that you violated the law, because as you mentioned, there is no number that test shows that really means anything other than that, yes, you had consumed cannabis at some point in the past, right? And so, and I think in all of the cases I deal with, I'm not hiding that. I will freely admit to the jury that my client consumed cannabis, and that, yes, it's in his blood. But that isn't what we're here to really look at or determine. We're here to determine whether or not their mental or physical condition was significantly affected by the use of cannabis. And that's an entirely different question. And those results from those tests really have no bearing on that. So, but I recommend to not take any of the tests except the blood.
Don't incriminate yourself.
Yeah, and officers will often ask you even I'll tell you, the strongest piece of evidence they usually have in a case, as far as juries go, is the person admitting to smoking cannabis.
Never admit it. They're not.
And so I wouldn't admit to smoking cannabis. I wouldn't take the tests. I wouldn't give them any evidence whatsoever, because at that point, the only thing they're going to have is possibly the smell of cannabis, which the jury instructions that we would read to a jury even explains to the jury that someone can smell of cannabis. That doesn't mean they were operating under the influence of cannabis.
Especially if they work in facilities that are licensed by the state in order to produce that.
Totally. And so really the only evidence, if you don't give it to them, the only thing they have is possibly the smell of cannabis and the way you were driving. And generally someone is being pulled over for some reason other than bad driving, as far as like impaired driving, right? They're usually pulled over for speeding or an equipment violation or something else, right? So in most cases, you're your own worst enemy when you're dealing with the police on a case like something like that.
Yeah, and we've had some good victories through your work in the foundation, Josh. Even with people admitting it and getting in trouble, if you do screw up and that, you're not looking at the 10-year, losing your license, felony, all that shit that they're gonna scare you with. Just don't, that's what they do. You can get down to civil infractions like we've done, like Josh talks about, or stuff that's not going to ruin your life. So great advice. I wanted to ask something that's I have a question. I think about what, Josh, you really kind of became famous in Michigan as from the Free Bree case, the CPS case, and what's your advice on that? What if you have CPS at your door, and walk us through that process and what you can get away with of not allowing them in, or if you have to, and what to say with that?
Yeah, that's I'd say a little more complicated and a case by case than the standard drugged driving. advice because CPS is a whole different world when it comes to law and what your rights are and what they aren't. And in my experience, in the last, let's say, 5 years or so, I've seen a big shift where they don't view cannabis quite like they did during the Free Bree case. And that case actually, single-handedly made a lot of difference. The CPS violated several of their own policies during that case and several aspects of their own training, and had to go back and change the way they train their employees and some of their own policies because of that case. And so that case I've seen a change since then. But I'd say since legalization, even more so, where it's generally not an issue anymore. I get calls, and I have gotten calls about, CPS is asking questions about marijuana use because I just, gave birth to a child, etc. And I think every case has been a non-issue. They close the case right away, and that's what their training tells them they're supposed to do. Their training says that someone can use marijuana or even like alcohol, or it even mentions illegal drugs, and still be a good parent. It's the question is, what's the effect on the child? And it's not just the fact that they use some substance. And so what we see now is that they really treat marijuana like alcohol in a lot of ways, and that you can certainly have it, you can possess it, in some cases even use around a child. But it really is a case by case basis. The reason why I have a hard time giving advice on a CPS case and something like this is that if you have rights as a criminal, as a defendant in a criminal case, and those rights are completely different when we're talking about CPS. If they knock at your door and you refuse to cooperate, they automatically escalate your case. And they have a tiered system of 4 levels. And the difference between them taking your kid away or not sometimes can be that cooperation. And so I try to tell people, don't instantly get fearful. Don't shut the door on them. Hear them out for a minute. Show them that, yes, I'm concerned about my child, and I'm willing to talk to you to see if there's something maybe I don't know, and to talk about them. You can even show them that where you keep your marijuana. I don't believe that's to be an issue. But I've had cases where not cooperating makes things much worse. And although we end up winning in the end, even if we didn't cooperate, that period of time between not cooperating and winning sometimes is bad, right? And not having your kid, or having to jump through a bunch of hoops in terms of taking classes or this or that. It's tough, right? So in those cases, I generally tell people to cooperate until they're asking you to do something unreasonable. And then each person needs to figure out what's unreasonable and what's not, right? And in some cases, like asking you to take a drug test, I think is unreasonable. Asking to come inside and you showing them that you've got running water and you've got food in your fridge, I don't know that that's unreasonable. In a CPS case, right? And then there's kind of everything in between. And that's for, I think, a lot of times each person to decide where they want to draw the line in terms of not cooperating. But you got to realize by not cooperating sometimes escalates the situation, and it can make things a little bit worse. And so I think having an attorney you talk to really can help you navigate whether or not you want to cooperate or not.
Well, that's encouraging to hear, though. It's a new world as far as how they're viewing cannabis use now versus, just even a few years ago. To see this change actually happen.
I can't think of a single case, and I'd say since I started my law firm, which would have been about 5 years ago, where the only issue was cannabis. Really? Sometimes it's a minor issue because there's other issues the parents are maybe struggling a little bit with, and cannabis just kind of gets tacked on. But I can't think of a single cannabis issue.
That's coming in my head. Like anyone knocking on my door without a warrant, I immediately go to get lost. But that's. I'm glad we talked about that because okay, it's fine, makes sense.
But how do people know? Like, is it okay to come out? Right? Is it clear?
Yeah.
There's the years and years of being programmed to fear that, because it was always something that could be, family life ending.
Yeah.
There's so many things, that everyone is fearful of. So we've been trained to distrust. So
Definitely. And I mean, I think you're better to err on the side of distrusting if you're not sure, right? But I think at least hearing that, hey, sometimes. So let me explain, I guess, what and I think this makes sense. So that if CPS gets a complaint, they have to investigate it. They're going to come out, they're going to knock on your door, they're going to call you, they're going to talk to you. And that makes sense because in our society, sometimes kids aren't treated correctly, right? And we need to make sure that if there's some kind of complaint, at least somebody goes out and checks on it, right? Now when that person, so you got to think that if they're coming to your door and knocking, they're not necessarily there to do anything other than to say that this was a complaint not worthy of us getting involved, right? But they have to do that initial checkup. They're going to ask to come into your house and they're going to ask to make sure you've got a place for your child to sleep, you've got food, you've got water, and you've got electricity. And that they're required to check those things off if they get a complaint, right? And in almost every case, things stop right then and there if cannabis is the issue, because they're not really there to get involved in people's lives anymore because of cannabis, right? And so I was investigated twice by CPS since I've been a parent, and I take great care of my kids. I love my kids. I had the school, my child had a bruise and he couldn't talk at the time. He was going through a special education program at the age of 3 because he wasn't talking. He had a bruise. He couldn't explain where it came from. So instead of talking to me, which I probably would have done as the school, but they're mandatory reporters. They're required by law to report certain things, and they reported it. The guy came out to my house, was friendly. We told him our son, we were camping for a week and we hiked a lot, and he fell a few times because he's 3 and he had a small bruise. And that was the end of it. They closed the case. I never heard anything else. But I'll tell you, when they came to my house that first time, I was super scared, even having went through this, right? So I understand people being reluctant, but had I put up more of a roadblock, it just would have made things worse. In that case, because I felt comfortable that nothing inappropriate was taking place. And in that case, it's easier to show them that. And again, this is way different than a criminal case. But that's just because of the way the laws are written.
Man. And then one of the things on another note, and that's like being in a different world, but that begs to the point that I still see a lot of chatter. And you guys see it too, like, oh, we got duped on Prop 1, everyone's getting arrested, like it's all this stuff. So what have you seen the difference between pre-Prop 1 and afterwards, as far as what's happened in Michigan in reality, and not just some of the people chatting?
Oh, it's been a huge success from every aspect that I've seen. I went from taking several calls a day from people having police involvement to, in the last year, I'd get a call a month maybe. And it really had to do with the police aren't looking for those things. Those things are now legal. A whole different attitude change. Those few cases that I have had over the last year have all been resolved in very favorable fashions, like civil infractions for someone having more plants than they were allowed. I've been able to do things that never would have happened before legalization. And so I think for the cannabis consumer, they are multitude of times more protected than they were before. And that goes for parents, consumers, you name it. It's been a success.
Can you kind of highlight some places that we still need to be, diligent in fighting?
Yeah, I think there's the drug driving is a big part of it, and luckily Michigan's done the right thing and it doesn't have a nanogram limit for impairment, but that's something that could always come about because other states have done it. and it's contrary to science. And luckily, Michigan saw that and decided not to do a nanogram level. The nanogram is what you find in someone's blood when you're testing for THC. You find a nanogram of THC is the unit of measurement. And so I think that's really big, because people are still getting arrested for drugged driving. But as far as that goes, doing, like, let's say, defending a drugged driving case, even that is much better in today's world, because I can openly talk with juries about marijuana during jury selection, and they will say things that they never would have said before. I had a gentleman in Hudsonville, Michigan, a juror, indicate to me that he had never used cannabis. And then I asked, well, do you know anybody that does? And he's like, yeah, he's a 70-year-old retired guy. He goes, yeah, my good friend does. And I was like, oh, well, when does he do it? He's like, well, he'll come over to my house and then he'll smoke, and then we'll go play golf. And I was like, do you drive to go play golf? He's like, yeah, my buddy drives. And I'm like, oh, so you get in the car with him? He's like, yeah. Well, you wouldn't do that if you thought he was impaired or something. He's like, no, of course I wouldn't. And this is, he'd never smoked in his life, but he said these things in a jury trial when I was picking the jury, and all the other jurors hear this. And it definitely puts the prosecuting attorney in a different mindset. They're like, oh, like the jurors are more okay with this than I thought. Right. And so, yeah, so even
Is it just me? Or did I lose?
I don't see that. My internet's still off.
Awkward. Hey, we're back.
Hey. Sorry about that. Little technical difficulties. Well, with that, before we go, I wanted to ask Josh one last question. Michigan sales, we're on pace now to do into 2022 over 2 billion. You got a good handle on things. Where do you see, with all the people coming in from the Midwest into Michigan to buy, and with us now tackling the black market coming over as we keep competing and getting lower and lower, where do you see Michigan going this year and then in the next couple of years? And what do you think will top out on sales?
Oh, that's a great question. I certainly think it's going to go up quite a bit for a couple of the reasons that you mentioned. Each time we get a new retail store open, it makes it easier for consumers to buy licensed cannabis. And I think we see numbers go up. We're still seeing retail stores open up across the state. We've seen a lot more in the Upper Peninsula along the border within the last year, which I think is increasing sales quite a bit. And we're still seeing new shops along the southern border, like Coldwater, for instance, and things like that. So I certainly see it going up, and then the pricing that is the quality for licensed product has been going up, and the prices have been coming down in most cases, which I think also draws consumers away from the black market in many instances. When we start getting those ounces priced around that $200 price point, I start to think we draw from the black market more so, and I think that's going to increase the number quite a bit. So I see this year going up, and for the foreseeable future, especially as we continue to draw from states like Wisconsin and Indiana, I think their market would be a few years away, even if they were to start, now, in terms of getting quality, good priced products in the marketplace. And so, but where it tops out, I don't know. I mean, that's a great question. I haven't really, I guess, thought about where it tops out. It's something I'll start to think about. It's kind of exciting.
It is. I'm predicting 4 billion, but in 3 years. So you heard it here first. We'll see. Yeah, and as sales continue to go, like right now they say, oh, it's been the same for a couple months, but it's more sales because prices have come down dramatically, especially from a year from now. So very good. What do you think, Tom? Let's get your opinion. You're an expert on this.
Definitely not an expert on this, man. I'm trying to wrap my brain around it every day.
Yeah.
Kind of almost like a full-time job at this point. I just hope to see things kind of level out, become a little bit more predictable as far as pricing. I think if the consumers, if everyone kind of finds their lane and stays in it, and everything's priced accordingly, I believe that we will be able to pull people out of the black market, which is the whole point of this licensed structure as it stands. And I believe if we can figure out where things do level out with quality and different tiers of products, if we can, figure out where those price points are that the consumer, is looking to pay and satisfy every level of quality and price point that people, are looking for, and everyone kind of stays in their lane with that type of a thing. And we stop looking at THC as the only thing that we're looking at to determine a price on something. We start looking at a grading scale, maybe some kind of way to standardize things. Then we can start to be a little bit more predictable. We're trying to keep things, at we'd like to see things at high end, a $10 gram, at a store, if you have a really high quality product. And at that price point, anything that and lower is very doable, anywhere between, $100 ounces to, $35, $40 out the door, high quality top shelf eighths and things of that nature. I think that those are more sustainable levels.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I'd go buy a real leaf eighth for $35 all day, and same with like Michigan Grown and some of the other companies out there, like especially.
You can come by Michigan's Finest today, and I think they're running some special for vendor days if anyone's interested in that.
Where is Michigan's Finest? What town?
In Wayne. Yeah, we'll be at
cool.
Local Roots tomorrow and Botanical in Lansing.
All right, well, cool. With that, Tom, why don't you? Any final thoughts? We got some hard outs here, so.
Yeah, it's just great to see, how your career is morphing, Josh. You were always so helpful when, even before licensure, getting, you're on my call list of people when I needed advice, and you're always so generous with your time. You're a fighter, and, I love having you on our team, and just cool to see things move forward, and I think that Meds Cafe and that all the groups that you're involved with, they're in really good hands. And just see how this whole thing shakes out. It's really exciting.
Cool. Josh, any final thoughts?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I always enjoy him talking and being on your show. I'd like to say the same thing, I guess, to you, Tom, and to you, Ryan, that it's kind of neat to see where everything goes. I think I've known both of you guys probably around 7-8 years. And I don't know when I first met either one of you that I really thought that, any of us would be doing the things that we're doing right now. Right. And so it's really cool. And so I'm really happy to do what I'm doing now, because I think I was a little limited in the way I could work with a lot of the people I've gotten to know over the years and a lot of my former clients, and that I was an attorney, and that was what I could do. But I think I can do a lot more now in terms of making sure a lot of us stick together and a lot of us work in terms of cross promotion and sharing ideas and, carrying products and things like that. And so I'm real excited to work on a little different level with everybody I've gotten to know over the last 10 years.
Yeah, that is really cool. And it's really, really fascinating to see, you as an attorney switching over to that in this brand new industry. Because we met each other in the first, I look at the, 09 to really 19 as the first 10 years for me in cannabis, the industry. And then here's the next 10 years and what's going to happen. And it's going to be wild at the end of this 10 years to go back and see who's made it through that. And
Our beards are going to be longer in 10 years. That's what.
No, and we beat them. We beat them. We got legalization really with guerrilla warfare because death by 1,000 cuts. They would take people out, that they thought were threats, and it just didn't matter. It just kept on coming in waves. So the same philosophy is going to go to the business side in Michigan as people like us make it over to it. So. Great show and best of luck, Josh. And can't wait to do a bunch more stuff with Meds Cafe. So with that, see you guys next week.
See ya.